The wagon rattled to a stop outside the Vance property just after noon, kicking up a cloud of red dirt that settled on everything like judgment. Ryan didn't wait for the driver to help him down. He jumped, landing hard enough that his boots sent up another plume of dust, and stood there with his canvas bag hanging from one shoulder and his chin lifted in a way that said he didn't give a damn what anybody thought. He was lying, of course. He gave a damn. He just couldn't afford to show it. The Vance house wasn't what he'd expected. It sprawled low and wide across the scrubland, built from timber and stone that looked like it had grown there instead of being hauled in. Not fancy, but solid, permanent. The kind of place that said the people inside weren't going anywhere, and if you had a problem with that, you could take it up with the rifles mounted over the door. A woman appeared on the porch, tall, thin, wearing a dark dress that might have been expensive once, but was worn now in that way that made it look more respectable somehow. Her hair was pulled back so tight, it seemed to hurt just looking at it. "You're the Calder boy." It wasn't a question. "Ryan," he said. "I know your name." The woman's eyes traveled down his dusty clothes, his scuffed boots, the wild tangle of dark hair he hadn't bothered to cut in months. "I'm Eleanor Vance. You'll call me Mrs. Vance. You'll work for your keep here. You'll attend services on Sunday. You'll conduct yourself with decorum, which I understand may be a foreign concept given your upbringing." Ryan felt something hot and sharp twist in his chest, but he swallowed it down. His father had been dead 3 weeks, hanged in the town square for crimes he didn't like to think about too hard. He'd watched from behind the general store, hidden, while they dragged his body down and loaded it onto a cart. Nobody had come looking for him after. Nobody wanted the son of Jack Calder. Nobody except the Vances, apparently. And they only wanted him because the circuit judge had decided it was better than letting him starve or turn to worse things. "I understand," Ryan said. "Do you?" Eleanor Vance studied him another moment, then turned and walked back into the house. "Bring your things. I'll show you where you'll sleep." The room was small. A bed, a washstand, a window that looked out over the back pasture where horses moved lazy in the heat. It was more than he'd had in months. More than he deserved, probably, if you asked anyone in town. "You'll help with the ranch work," Mrs. Vance said from the doorway. "My husband and sons work the land. We need hands we can trust. You'll muck stalls, mend fences, handle the horses. Do you know how to do those things?" "Most of them." "You'll learn the rest." Mrs. Vance paused. "There are rules here, Mr. Calder. We are a respectable family. Whatever your father was, whatever you might have seen or learned from him, that ends now. You keep your head down, you work hard, and you stay away from trouble. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She started to leave, then stopped. "And stay away from my daughter. She doesn't need complications, and you strike me as the complicating type." The door closed before Ryan could respond. He stood there in the silence, his bag still hanging from his shoulder, and felt the weight of it all settle in. This was his life now. This room, these rules, this family that looked at him like he was a stray dog they'd taken in out of obligation. He dropped the bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was thin but clean. Through the window, he could hear men's voices drifting up from somewhere near the barn. Laughter. The sound of it made his chest ache in a way he couldn't name. His father had laughed like that sometimes. Before the drinking got worse. Before the jobs went bad. Before he'd killed that rancher over a card game and run for 3 days straight with a posse on his heels. He stood up fast, shoving the memory away. No point in that. No point in thinking about what was or what could have been. This was what there was. This room, this family, this chance he didn't deserve but would take anyway, because the alternative was dying alone in some dusty corner of this godforsaken territory. He unpacked his bag. It didn't take long. 2 shirts, both threadbare. A pair of work gloves with holes in the fingers. A small tin that held his father's pocket watch, stopped at the exact moment they'd kicked the chair out from under him. He set it on the washstand and stared at it for a moment, then turned away. Dinner was awkward in the way that made Ryan's skin crawl. The dining room was formal, too formal for a frontier house, he thought, with a long table and straight-back chairs and silverware that actually matched. Mr. Vance sat at the head, a broad-shouldered man with iron-gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of something harder than stone. Eleanor sat at the other end, and between them, the 3 children, Ethan sat closest to his father, older, maybe 25 or so, with the kind of face that was handsome in a serious way. Dark hair, clean-shaven, shoulders that said he worked hard but didn't need to prove it. He glanced at Ryan when he came in, but didn't say anything, just gave him a small nod, polite, like he was a guest instead of Charity. Beside Ethan sat a young woman, Sarah. Ryan had heard her name mentioned but hadn't seen her yet. She was maybe 20, with dark hair like her brother's, and eyes that tracked him the second he walked in. Not hostile, exactly. More curious. Like she was trying to figure him out. And across from them sat Colt. Colt was different. He leaned back in his chair like he owned not just the seat but the whole damn room. Younger than Ethan by a year or two, but bigger somehow. Not in size, they were about the same height, but in presence. Dark eyes that locked onto Ryan immediately. A crooked grin that said he knew something Ryan didn't and found it funny. "So you're the outlaw's son," he said. "Colt." Mr. Vance's voice was low and sharp. "What?" "We're all thinking it." Colt picked up his glass and took a drink, still watching Ryan over the rim. "Might as well say it. Jack Calder's boy. Hell of a legacy." "That's enough." Mr. Vance's hand came down flat on the table, not loud but final. "He's here under my roof. You'll treat him with respect or you'll find somewhere else to take your meals." Colt shrugged, but the grin didn't leave his face. "Sure, Pa." "Respect." "Got it." Ryan sat down in the empty chair between Eleanor and Ethan, keeping his eyes on his plate. His face felt hot, his hands unsteady. He wanted to say something back, something sharp that would wipe that grin off Colt's face, but the words tangled up in his throat. "Don't mind him," Ethan said quietly. "He's got a talent for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time." Ryan glanced at him. His expression was calm, almost kind, and it made something loosen in his chest just a fraction. "Thanks." "Ethan, pass the potatoes," Eleanor said, and just like that, the moment was over. They ate in near silence after that. Ryan forced himself to take small bites, to chew slowly, to not look like he was starving even though he was. He could feel eyes on him every few minutes, Colt's mostly, but Sarah's too, and once or twice Mr. Vance's measuring gaze. When the meal finally ended, Mr. Vance pushed back from the table. "Ethan, I need you at the north fence line tomorrow. Some of the posts are rotting out." "Yes, sir." "Colt, you'll take the cattle to the south pasture, and keep an eye on them. We've had wolves this week." "I'll handle it." Colt stood, still grinning. "Always do." "You handle it when you're not too busy running your mouth," Ethan said, and there was an edge to it that Ryan hadn't heard before. Colt's grin widened. "You worried I'll embarrass you, big brother? Make you look bad in front of the new help? I'm worried you'll get yourself killed doing something stupid. Again." "Boys," Mr. Vance's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That's enough. Both of you." Colt laughed, low and rough, and walked out. Ethan followed a moment later, quieter, his jaw tight. Ryan sat there feeling like he'd just watched something he wasn't supposed to see. Eleanor stood and began gathering plates, her movement sharp and efficient. "You'll help clear the table," she said, not looking at Ryan. "And then you'll go to bed. We start early here." Sarah spoke for the first time. "I can show him where things go, Mother." Eleanor's eyes cut to her daughter. "You'll do no such thing. Go to your room." "But..." "Now, Sarah." The girl stood, gave Ryan one last curious look, and left. Ryan helped Eleanor with the dishes in uncomfortable silence, acutely aware that he was being tested somehow. The days blurred together after that. Ryan woke before dawn, worked until his hands bled and his back screamed. He mucked stalls, hauled feed, mended fences until his shoulders felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. Mr. Vance watched him constantly, correcting his technique, his posture, the way he handled the horses. It was exhausting and humiliating, and Ryan hated every second of it. But he didn't complain. Couldn't afford to. Ethan was decent in a distant sort of way. He'd nod when he saw Ryan, sometimes ask if he needed help lifting something heavy. Once, he brought him water while Ryan was working in the sun and told him he didn't have to push himself so hard. "Your father expects it," Ryan said. "My father expects a lot of things." He handed Ryan the canteen. "Doesn't mean you have to kill yourself trying to meet them all." Ryan took a drink, the water cool and sharp, and looked at him. Really looked. He had his father's seriousness, but there was something softer underneath, something that didn't fit with the hard men Ryan had known all his life. "Why are you being decent to me?" he asked. Ethan seemed surprised by the question. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because of who my father was. What he did." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "You're not your father. People forget that sometimes, but it's true. You're just you." It was such a simple thing to say, but it hit Ryan harder than he expected. He looked away, blinking fast, and handed the canteen back. "Thanks. Anytime." He walked off toward the barn, and Ryan went back to working, his hands shaking just a little. Colt, on the other hand, was a problem. He didn't ignore Ryan the way Eleanor wanted him to. He went out of his way to find him, leaning against the fence while Ryan worked with the horses, making comments that walked the line between friendly and mocking. Following him to the well and offering advice Ryan didn't ask for. He had a way of looking at Ryan that felt like a challenge, like he was waiting for him to crack. "You don't talk much," he said one afternoon, catching Ryan on his way to the barn. "I've got nothing to say." "I don't believe that." He fell into step beside Ryan. "Boy like you've got plenty to say. You're just smart enough to keep your mouth shut. Or maybe I don't want to talk to you." He laughed at that, loud and sudden. "Yeah, maybe that's it." Ryan stopped walking and turned to face him, his patience finally snapping. "What do you want, Colt?" "Want?" He tilted his head, still grinning. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just curious. You show up here with that look on your face like you're ready to burn the whole place down, and then you spend every day breaking your back and acting like a kicked dog. Doesn't add up." "I'm not a dog." "Didn't say you were." He stepped closer, and Ryan held his ground even though every instinct told him to back up. "But you're scared of something. I can see it. You don't know anything about me." "Not yet." His eyes locked on Ryan's, dark and unreadable. "But I will." He walked away before Ryan could respond, leaving him standing there with his heart hammering in his chest and his fists clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. Sarah was the real surprise. She found him in the barn 3 days later, while he was cleaning tack. He looked up, and there she was, standing in the doorway with the afternoon light behind her. "You're Ryan," she said. "I know who I am." "That was rude. I was just being polite." He set down the bridle he'd been working on. "Sorry. Didn't mean it that way." "Yes, you did, but it's fine. Everyone's rude when they first get here." She came closer, examining the tack with an expert eye. "You're doing that wrong." "What?" "The leather. You're scrubbing too hard. You'll crack it." She took the cloth from his hand and showed him, her movements quick and efficient. "Like this. Gentle circles. Let the oil do the work." Ryan watched her hands, then tried to copy the motion. "Better?" "Much." She handed back the cloth. "I'm Sarah, but you probably figured that out. Your mother told me to stay away from you." "My mother tells everyone to stay away from me. She thinks I'm too curious for my own good." Sarah sat on a hay bale, arranging her skirts. "Are you dangerous?" Ryan called her. "I don't know. Are you?" That got a laugh out of her. "I like you. Most people just nod and agree with whatever I say. You push back." "Is that a good thing?" "Time will tell." She studied him with those sharp eyes. "My brothers talk about you at dinner, when you're not there." "What do they say?" "Ethan thinks you're trying too hard, says you'll burn yourself out if you keep pushing like this. Colt thinks you're hiding something, that all this quiet obedience is an act." "And what do you think?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I think you're exactly who you seem to be. A boy who's had everything taken from him and is trying to figure out how to survive without becoming like his father." The accuracy of it stole his breath. He looked away, focusing on the leather in his hands. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That was too much. I have a habit of saying what I'm thinking. It's fine. You're not wrong." "Does it help, knowing you're not him?" "Not really. People see the name, and that's all they need. Then make them see something else. Show them you're more than just Jack Calder's son." She stood, brushing hay from her dress. "You're allowed to be angry about what happened, about how unfair it all is. You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt. Your mother wouldn't approve of this conversation." My mother doesn't approve of most of what I do. I'll see you at dinner, Ryan." She left, and Ryan sat there in the barn, feeling like he'd just been seen in a way he hadn't in months, maybe years. The first real trouble came 2 weeks later. Ryan was in the barn, mucking out stalls, when he heard voices raised outside. He set down the pitchfork and moved to the door, peeking out. Ethan and Colt stood near the corral, facing each other. Even from a distance, he could see the tension in their shoulders, the way they held themselves like they were about to come to blows. "You can't keep doing this," Ethan was saying. "You're going to get someone killed." "I know what I'm doing." "You think you do. There's a difference." Colt laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What? You worried I'm going to embarrass the family? Make Pa look bad? I'm worried you're going to get yourself killed over something stupid. Again, that's rich coming from you. When's the last time you took a risk, Ethan? When's the last time you did anything that didn't have Pa's approval stamped all over it? This isn't about me. It's always about you." Colt stepped closer, his voice dropping but no less sharp. "You're the golden boy, the responsible one. The one who's going to inherit all this and run it into the ground because you're too scared to make a real decision." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you're the one who thinks being reckless makes you brave. It doesn't. It just makes you a liability." For a second, Ryan thought Colt was going to swing. His hands balled into fists, his whole body coiled tight. But then he shook his head and stepped back, that crooked grin sliding back into place. "You know what? You're right. I'm a liability. Always have been." He turned and started walking toward the house, then stopped and looked back. "But at least I'm not a coward." Ethan stood there, his face unreadable, and didn't respond. Ryan slipped back into the barn before either of them could see him. His heart was pounding, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, something that felt uncomfortably close to understanding. He knew what it was like to be the one people whispered about, the one who didn't fit, the liability, and he knew what it was like to be angry about it. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Mr. Vance asked about the day's work, and Ethan answered in short, clipped sentences. Colt didn't say anything at all, just ate and stared at his plate like it had personally offended him. Eleanor watched them all with that tight, controlled expression she always wore, and Ryan kept his eyes down, pushing food around and wishing he was anywhere else. When the meal ended, Colt left without a word. Ethan stayed to help clear the table, and Ryan found himself working beside him in the kitchen while Eleanor went to check on something in the other room. "I'm sorry you had to see that earlier," Ethan said quietly. Ryan glanced at him, then back at the dishes. "It's not my business." "No, but you're here, and I know it's not easy being in the middle of all this." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just kept scrubbing. "Colt's not a bad person," Ethan continued. He's got all this anger in him, and he doesn't know what to do with it. Never has. You don't have to explain him to me." "I know." He paused. "I just don't want you to think we're all like that. Some of us try to do the right thing." Ryan looked at him then, really looked, and saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of trying to hold everything together. It reminded him of himself in a way that made his chest ache. "I can see that," he said. Ethan gave him a small smile, and for just a moment the kitchen didn't feel so suffocating. The railroad rumors started a few days later. Ryan didn't understand most of it at first. He'd hear bits of conversation between Mr. Vance and his sons, talk of surveyors and land rights and threats that didn't make sense to him, but he could feel the shift in the house. The way Mr. Vance's jaw got tighter every time someone mentioned it. The way Eleanor's hands moved faster when she was cooking, like she was trying to outrun her own thoughts. "They want to cut through the valley," Ethan explained one evening when Ryan asked. They were sitting on the back porch, both of them too tired to go inside yet. "Run the line straight through. Would take half our grazing land." "Can they do that?" "They can if they've got the law on their side." "And they usually do." Ryan stared out at the darkening sky. "So what happens?" "We fight. Or we lose everything." "Which one do you think it'll be?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know." Sarah appeared around the corner then, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "You two look grim." "Just talking," Ethan said, "about the railroad." It wasn't a question. She sat down beside Ryan, close enough that he could smell lavender. "Father's planning something, I can tell." Sarah, you shouldn't. I'm not a child, Ethan. I know what's happening. She looked at Ryan. And you should know too. If things go bad, if there's violence, you need to be ready. Ready for what? To choose which side you're on. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ryan felt the weight of them settling over his shoulders. He doesn't have to choose anything, Ethan said. This isn't his fight. It is if he's living here, if he's part of this family. Sarah's eyes were sharp in the fading light. You can't sit on the fence forever, Ryan. Eventually you have to decide who you are. She stood and went inside, leaving the two men sitting in uncomfortable silence. She's wrong, Ethan said. You don't owe us anything. Don't I? You took me in, fed me, gave me a place to sleep. That doesn't make you responsible for our problems? No, but it makes me part of them whether I want to be or not. Ethan didn't argue with that. The next morning, a rider came in from town. Ryan watched from the barn as he talked to Mr. Vance, his face grim. When he rode off, Mr. Vance called his sons over, and the three of them stood in a tight circle, talking low and fast. Sarah found Ryan a few minutes later. It's happening faster than we thought. The railroad's bringing in hired men. They're planning to start work within 2 weeks. How do you know? I listen at doors. It's amazing what people say when they think no one's around. She leaned against the barn wall. Father wants to fight. Ethan wants to negotiate. And Colt, she shrugged. Colt just wants to hit something. What do you want? I want my family to survive this, whatever it takes. She looked at him. What about you? I want to not get shot. That got a small smile from her. Practical. I like it. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to the wind scrape against the side of the house, and thought about Sarah's words. Choose which side you're on, as if it were that simple, as if he had any right to choose at all. He wondered if his father had felt like this, caught between what was right and what was necessary, between survival and principle. He wondered if that's how it started, the slow slide from trying to do right to doing whatever it took to get by. Somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. Footsteps moved through the hall, slow and uneven. Ryan sat up and crept to his door, pressing his ear against it. Voices, low and angry. You're drunk. So what? So you need to go to bed before Pa sees you. Let him see. What's he going to do, disown me? He already thinks I'm worthless. That's not true. Isn't it? A pause. You know what your problem is, Ethan? You think if you do everything right, if you follow all the rules, everyone's going to love you. But they don't. They just use you. And your way's better, pissing everyone off and pretending you don't care? At least I'm honest about what I am. Silence. Then footsteps again, moving away. Ryan stood there in the dark, his hand on the door handle, and felt something crack open inside him. Because he understood what Colt had just said. Understood it in a way that made him want to scream. At least I'm honest about what I am. Ryan knew what he was too, the son of a killer, a boy with no future and a past that followed him like a shadow. He could pretend all he wanted, could work himself to exhaustion and keep his head down and try to earn his place here, but it wouldn't change the truth. And maybe that's why Colt unnerved him so much. Because when Colt looked at him, he saw that truth. And he didn't look away. The heat came early that summer, settling over the land like something alive and mean. By mid-morning, the air shimmered, turning the horizon into a liquid thing that bent and wavered. Ryan worked through it, his shirt soaked with sweat, his hands raw from hauling fence posts and digging post holes, and all the endless tasks Mr. Vance found for him. He'd been at the Vance place almost a month now, and the rhythm of it had worn grooves into his days. Wake before dawn, work until dark, fall into bed too tired to think. It should have been simple. It should have been enough. But nothing about this place was simple. The railroad men came on a Tuesday. 3 of them, riding horses too fine for the territory, wearing suits that looked ridiculous in all that dust. Ryan was repairing a section of fence when they rode up to the house, and he watched through the heat shimmer as Mr. Vance came out to meet them. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could read the body language well enough. The lid man, tall and thin with a silver watch chain glinting across his vest, did most of the talking. Mr. Vance stood with his arms crossed, his face carved from granite. Behind him, Ethan and Colt had appeared from somewhere, flanking their father like sentries. The conversation didn't last long. The railroad man said something final, tipped his hat in a way that seemed more mocking than polite, and turned his horse around. His companions followed, and the three of them rode back down the road in a cloud of red dust. Mr. Vance stood there watching until they disappeared, then turned and walked into the house without a word. Ethan followed. Colt stayed outside, staring after the riders, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. Ryan pulled another post from the pile and tried not to look like he'd been watching. But when he glanced up again, Colt was looking straight at him. He crossed the yard in long strides, and Ryan felt his stomach tighten. There was something different in his face today. The usual grin was gone, replaced by something harder. "You hear what they said?" Colt asked. "No." "They're giving us 2 weeks. Then they're bringing in their crew and cutting through whether we like it or not." He pulled a cigarette from his pocket and lit it, his hand steady despite the anger radiating off him. "Said if we interfere, they'll have the law down here so fast our heads'll spin." "Can they do that?" "They can do whatever the hell they want. They've got money and connections, and we're just dirt farmers as far as they're concerned." He took a drag, exhaled smoke into the shimmering air. "Your daddy ever tell you about men like that?" Ryan's hand stilled on the fence post. "My daddy told me a lot of things." "I bet he did." Colt studied him through the smoke. "He tell you what to do when someone tries to take what's yours. He told me you fight back or you die." "Smart man." He flicked ash into the dirt. Shame about how things turned out for him. It should have made him angry, that casual cruelty. But Ryan was tired of being angry, tired of carrying his father's ghost around like a weight he couldn't put down. So he just looked at Colt and said, "Yeah, real shame." Something shifted in Colt's expression. Not quite respect, but close. He studied Ryan another moment, then nodded toward the house. "You should probably finish up here. Pa's going to want all hands ready for whatever comes next." "You think there's going to be trouble?" "I know there is. Question is whether we meet it head on or roll over." Colt's smile was sharp and bitter. "My money's on head on. Pa doesn't know how to back down from a fight." He walked off toward the barn, and Ryan went back to the fence, his mind turning over what he'd said. 2 weeks. Then everything would change, one way or another. That night at dinner, the tension was thick enough to taste. Mr. Vance barely touched his food, just sat there with his hands folded on the table, staring at nothing. Eleanor kept getting up to fetch things from the kitchen, even though everything was already on the table. Ethan ate in silence, his jaw tight. And Colt surprisingly didn't say a word, just pushed his food around and drank more than he ate. Finally, Mr. Vance spoke. "We're meeting with the other landowners tomorrow, seeing if we can present a unified front." "And if they won't stand with us?" Ethan asked. "Then we stand alone." "That's suicide, Pa. You know that." "I know what it is." Mr. Vance's voice was flat, final. "But I'm not letting them take what 3 generations of Vances built. Not without a fight." "Huh? There are other ways to fight," Ethan said carefully. Legal channels take time we don't have. And money we don't have. No, if this is happening, we do it on our terms." Colt set down his glass, the sound sharp in the quiet. "What are you saying?" Mr. Vance looked at his younger son, and for a moment something passed between them that Ryan couldn't read. "I'm saying we make it clear they're not welcome here. We make it dangerous for them to try." "Ambrose," Eleanor's voice was tight. "That's not—" "I know what it is," he said again, "and I've made my decision." Ethan pushed back from the table, the legs of his chair scraping against the floor. "This is wrong. You have a better idea? You let me know." "I'm letting you know right now. Violence isn't the answer. It never is. All it's going to do is get people killed and give them the excuse they need to bring in the army." "Then what would you have me do?" "Mister." Vance's voice rose just slightly, and the change was like thunder in the distance. "Roll over? Let them take everything?" "I'd have you be smart about it. Strategic. We can talk this to death is what we can do. I'm done talking." Mr. Vance stood, and everyone else stood with him out of reflex. "Meetings tomorrow at noon. I expect both of you there." He walked out, and Eleanor followed after giving them all a look that could have stripped paint. Ryan stood there, his plate still half full, watching Ethan and Colt face each other across the table. "You know he's wrong," Ethan said. "I know you think he is." This isn't about what I think. It's about reality. You start shooting at railroad men, it's going to end bad for everyone. Colt's laugh was ugly, as opposed to how good it's going to end if we just let them walk all over us. There's middle ground. There's no middle ground, not with men like that. They see middle ground as weakness. Colt came around the table. You want to know what your problem is? You're so busy trying to be the good son, the moral one, you can't see what's right in front of you. And you're so busy trying to prove you're as tough as Pa, you can't see you're going to get us all killed. They stood there, inches apart, and Ryan held his breath. But Colt just shook his head and walked out, his footsteps heavy on the floorboards. Ethan stayed where he was, his hands braced on the table, breathing hard. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face pale. This is going to get bad, isn't it? Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I think it is. She looked at Ryan. What are you going to do? I don't know what you mean. When it happens, when they start shooting, whose side are you on? Sarah, that's not fair, Ethan said. It's a fair question. He's part of this household now. He needs to decide. Ryan set down his napkin, his hands steady, even though his heart was racing. I'm on the side that doesn't get me killed. That good enough for you? Sarah's expression didn't change. We'll see. She left, and Ryan stood alone with Ethan in the dining room, surrounded by the ruins of dinner. You don't have to choose, Ethan said. When it happens, you can leave. Go to town, stay out of it. Nobody would blame you. Your father would. My father's judgment isn't worth dying for. Maybe not, but a roof over my head and food in my stomach might be. Ryan looked at him. I know what I am to this family, charity, an obligation, but it's more than I had before and I'm not ready to give it up yet. You're more than that. Am I? Because your sister just asked me to pick a side like I'm cattle to be sorted. He shook his head. I'll work. I'll keep my head down. And when the shooting starts, I'll do whatever I have to do to survive. That's all I can promise. Ethan studied him for a long moment. That's more honest than most people would be. Honesty's about all I've got left. The meeting the next day was at the Harper place, 10 miles south. Ryan wasn't invited, but he heard about it later from one of the ranch hands who'd gone along. Only half of them showed up, the man said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. The rest are too scared of the railroad to stand against them. Mister, Vance tried to convince them, but you could tell it wasn't working. I ain't never seen him so angry. What about Ethan and Colt? Oh, they were there. Though Ethan looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And Colt, well, he just looked ready to hit something. The hand paused. Or someone. Ryan kept working, digging another post hole, and tried not to think about what was coming. But it was like trying not to think about a storm when you could already see the lightning on the horizon. That night, Sarah found him in the barn. He was checking on the horses, making sure they were settled, when she appeared in the doorway. You've been avoiding me, she said. I've been working. Same thing, with you. She came closer, her skirts rustling in the hay. I'm sorry about what I said at dinner, about choosing sides. That wasn't fair. It was honest. Honest doesn't always mean right. She leaned against the stall door, watching him work. Ethan thinks you're going to run when things get bad. What do you think? I think you're tougher than you look, and smarter than you let on. She was quiet for a moment. But I also think you're scared, and I don't blame you. Ryan finished checking the last horse and turned to face her. You want to know the truth? I am scared. I've seen what happens when men start shooting at each other. I've seen what it does to families, and I don't want any part of it. Then leave, tonight, before it's too late. I thought you wanted me to choose a side. I want you to live. There's a difference. She stepped closer, and in the dim light of the barn, her eyes were dark and serious. My father's going to get people killed. Maybe himself, maybe my brothers. And I can't stop him. But I can make sure you're not one of them. Why do you care? Because someone should. And because... She stopped, looked away. Because you remind me that there's a world outside this place. Outside this family and its pride and its stupid, endless fights. You could go anywhere, be anyone. You're not trapped here like we are. You're not trapped. Aren't I? I'm a woman in a territory where women don't own property, don't make decisions, don't have any say in their own futures. My father will marry me off to whoever strengthens our position, and I'll spend the rest of my life being someone's wife instead of my own person." Her voice was bitter. "At least you have a choice." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. He'd never thought about what it meant to be Sarah Vance, to have education and intelligence and no way to use them, to watch your family tear itself apart and be powerless to stop it. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Don't be. Just promise me you'll survive this, however you have to do it." "I'll try." "Good." She moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "And Ryan? If things go really bad, if you need help getting out, come find me. I'll help you." She left before he could respond, and Ryan stood there in the empty barn, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Colt found him the next afternoon. Ryan was working on a stretch of fence near the road when he heard hoofbeats and looked up to see Colt riding toward him. "Need a break?" Colt called. "I'm fine." "Wasn't asking if you were fine. Was asking if you wanted a break." He dismounted and pulled a flask from his saddlebag. "Come on. You've been out here since dawn. Even Pa takes breaks." Ryan hesitated, then set down his tools. Colt handed him the flask, and he took a drink. Whiskey, harsh and burning. "You settling in all right?" Colt asked, taking the flask back. "As much as I can." "That's a diplomatic answer." He took a drink. "You know what I like about you, Calder? You don't bullshit. Most people come here, they're all smiles and yes sir, no sir, trying to make everyone happy. You just keep your head down and work." "Not much else I can do." "Sure there is. You could run. You could steal. You could do what your daddy did and take what you want and damn the consequences." He looked at Ryan. "But you don't." "Why?" "Because I saw where that got him." "Smart." Colt was quiet for a moment. "You scared about what's coming with the railroad?" "Aren't you?" "Terrified. But I can't show it. Pa needs someone to stand with him, and Ethan's too busy being right to be useful." He took another drink. "So it falls to me. The screw-up. The liability." "You're not a screw-up." "You don't know that. You barely know me." "I know you're angry, and I know you're trying to prove something, but that doesn't make you a screw-up." Colt stared at him, and something shifted in his expression. "Sarah's been talking to you." "What makes you say that?" "Because you sound like her. All that insight and understanding." He shook his head. "She sees things other people don't. Always has. It's why Ma keeps such a tight leash on her. She thinks you're going to get yourself killed." "Yeah, well, she's probably right." He handed the flask back to Ryan. "You should drink more. Going to need it for what's coming." "What is coming?" "War. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon." He looked out at the land, at the horizon shimmering in the heat. "And when it does, you're going to have to choose. Fight or run. There's no middle ground." "Your brother seems to think there is." "My brother's an idealist. He thinks the law matters, that reason and negotiation can solve everything. But he's wrong. Out here, the only thing that matters is power. Who has it? Who's willing to use it?" Colt met Ryan's eyes. "So which are you?" "I don't know yet." "Well, figure it out fast, because once the shooting starts, there's no time for thinking." He mounted his horse and rode off, and Ryan stood there with the flask in his hand, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on him. The railroad crew showed up exactly 2 weeks after the first visit. Ryan saw them from the fence line, a line of wagons and horses stretching down the road, maybe 20 men in all. Some looked like workers, rough and tired. Others looked dangerous, armed and hard-eyed, the kind who made violence look casual. "Mister." Vance was already outside, flanked by Ethan and Colt, and 3 men Ryan recognized from neighboring ranches. They stood in a line across the property entrance, blocking the way, and even from a distance Ryan could see how badly they were outnumbered. He dropped his tools and ran toward the house, his heart pounding. Sarah met him at the back door. "Don't go out there." You have to stay here. If you go out there, you're choosing, and once you choose, you can't take it back." "But..." Her hand was on his arm, gripping tight. "Please, Ryan, just stay inside." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her he couldn't just hide while her family faced down armed men. But she was right. The moment he stepped outside, the moment he stood with the Vances, He'd be declaring himself, and there'd be no going back. So he stayed, stood at the window with Sarah beside him, watching as the confrontation unfolded. "You're on private property, Mr." Vance's voice carried across the yard, hard and flat. "We have a legal right of way." A different voice, smooth and educated. "Certified by the territorial government. You can examine the papers if you'd like." "I don't care about your papers. This land belongs to my family, and you're not crossing it." "Mr. Vance, I understand your frustration, but the law is clear. We'll be starting work today with or without your cooperation. I'd strongly suggest you stand aside. And I'd strongly suggest you turn around and go back where you came from." A pause, then quieter. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm stating a fact. You try to come through here, there'll be consequences." "Is that so?" The smooth voice had gone cold. "Perhaps you'd like to discuss those consequences with my associates." Ryan heard movement, boots on hard ground, the creak of leather. His hands were shaking. "Everyone calm down." That was Ethan, his voice cutting through the tension. "There's no need for this to get out of hand. We can—" "Stay out of this," Mr. Vance said. "Pa, listen to me. I said stay out of it. I won't watch you start a war over pride." The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. Ryan could feel it, heavy and dangerous, like the air before lightning strikes. When Mr. Vance spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Get in the house, Ethan." "No. That's an order. I'm not leaving, and I'm not letting you do this." Colt's laugh cut through the tension, harsh and mocking. "Well, look at that. The golden boy finally grew a spine." "Shut up, Colt. Make me." "Both of you, enough." Mr. Vance's voice cracked like a whip. "We stand together or not at all." "Then I guess it's not at all." Ethan's voice was steady, but Ryan could hear the tremor underneath. "Because I won't be part of this. It's wrong, and you know it." "You'd side with them, against your own family?" "I'm not siding with anyone. I'm trying to stop you from making a mistake that'll get people killed. The only mistake I made was raising a coward." The words fell like stones. "Get out of my sight." Ryan heard footsteps, fast and angry, and then Ethan appeared in the back hallway, his face white with fury or grief or both. He saw Ryan and Sarah standing at the window and stopped. "You should get away from there," he said, and his voice was raw. "What's going to happen?" Sarah asked. "I don't know." He looked back toward the front of the house. "But it's not going to be good." Then they heard gunfire. The first shot cracked through the air like the world breaking open. Ryan's body moved before his mind caught up, dropping him to the floor, his hands pressed over his ears, even though the damage was already done. The sound echoed through the house, through his bones, and for a frozen second there was nothing but ringing silence. Then chaos. More gunfire, shouting, the scream of horses. Eleanor's voice from somewhere downstairs, high and sharp. Ryan crawled to the window and looked out, his heart slamming against his ribs. The railroad men had scattered, some diving behind their wagons, others reaching for weapons. Mr. Vance and the ranchers had their rifles up, and he could see Colt moving toward the corral, his gun already drawn. But there was no sign of who'd fired first. No way to know if this had been defense or provocation or just the inevitable collision of two forces that couldn't exist in the same space. A bullet shattered the window above his head, spraying glass across the floor. Ryan threw himself backward, his shoulder hitting the wall hard enough to knock the breath out of him. He tasted blood where he'd bitten his tongue. "Ryan!" Sarah's voice closer now. She was crawling toward him across the floor. "Are you hit?" "No, you?" "I'm fine." But her face was white, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to get to the cellar." They ran, hunched over as more shots punched through the walls. Ryan could hear wood splintering, the heavy thud of bullets finding solid things. The stairs felt endless, each step a lifetime. And when they finally reached the kitchen, Eleanor was there, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "Downstairs, both of you, now." "What about Ethan?" Sarah asked. "Your brother can take care of himself. Move!" They went. The cellar was dark and cool and smelled like earth and old potatoes. Ryan crouched on the bottom step, leaving the door cracked open just enough to hear, and tried to steady his breathing. The gunfire was sporadic now. A shot, then silence, then two or three in quick succession. He could hear men shouting but couldn't make out the words. Then, cutting through it all, a voice he recognized. "Hold fire! Everyone hold your damn fire!" Ethan. Ryan had never heard him sound like that before, raw and commanding, like he'd shed some layer of restraint and found something harder underneath. The shooting stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse, stretched tight and fragile. Ryan climbed the stairs slowly, quietly, and pushed the cellar door open. Eleanor was at the window, one hand pressed against the frame, staring out. He moved beside her and looked. The scene outside had frozen into something almost theatrical. The railroad men behind their wagons, guns still raised. Mr. Vance and the ranchers spread out across the yard, weapons ready. And between them, standing in the no man's land with his hands raised, was Ethan. "This stops now," he was saying, his voice carrying across the distance. "No more shooting, no more threats. We talk, or we all die here like fools." "Get out of the way, Ethan." Mr. Vance's voice was tight with fury. "No, Pa, I won't. You're making a mistake." "Huh?" The mistake was starting this. Ethan turned to face his father, his back to the railroad men, and Ryan felt his breath catch. "You want to fight them? Fine. But you do it the right way, through the courts, through the law, not like this. The law doesn't care about us." "Maybe not, but it cares about this, about what happens when people start killing each other over land disputes." He gestured at the railroad men without looking at them. "You think they won't use this? You think they won't run to every newspaper and courthouse between here and Washington and paint us as the aggressors? We'll lose everything, not because we're wrong, but because we look like criminals." He's got a point. One of the ranchers, an older man with a gray beard, lowered his rifle slightly. "My boy's a lawyer up in Denver. He says the same thing. We go violent. We hand them the excuse they need." "I don't care about excuses, mister," Vance said, but something in his voice had shifted, less certain. "You should." Ethan turned back to the railroad men. "You, in the fancy suit. You want this land?" The smooth-voiced man stepped out from behind a wagon, cautious. "We have a legal right to it. Show me the papers." "I already told your father." "I'm not my father. Show me the papers, and we'll examine them. Properly. With witnesses. And if they're legitimate, we'll talk about compensation. Fair compensation, not whatever lowball number you were planning to throw at us." The man hesitated, then pulled a leather folder from inside his coat. He walked forward slowly, watching Ethan like he might be a trap about to spring. Ethan took the papers and started reading, his face unreadable. Colt appeared from somewhere near the barn, his gun still in his hand. "What the hell are you doing?" "Fixing this." "By rolling over?" "By being smart." Ethan didn't look up from the papers. "Something you might want to try sometime." "You self-righteous son of a—" "Colt, stand down." Mr. Vance's voice was tired. "Let him look." Ryan watched Colt's face twist with something ugly and desperate. He looked at Ethan, then at their father, then at the railroad men with an expression that made Ryan's stomach drop. For a second he thought Colt might start shooting anyway, just to spite them all. But he didn't. He just spat in the dirt and walked away, shoving his gun into his belt. Ethan finished reading and looked up at the railroad man. "These are legitimate. Mostly. There's some language in here that's questionable, and the survey boundaries don't match what's recorded in the county office. That's going to need to be addressed." "We can discuss that," the man said carefully. "We will. But not here. And not like this." Ethan handed the papers back. "You're going to leave, today. And you're not coming back until we've had a proper meeting with legal representation on both sides. If you try to start work before that happens, I'll file an injunction so fast it'll make your head spin. You don't have the authority." "No, but the territorial judge does, and he's a friend of the family." Ethan smiled, thin and cold. "You want to test that?" The railroad man looked at Ethan, then at the gun still trained on his men, then back at Ethan. Whatever he saw there made him decide. 2 weeks, he said. "We'll meet in 2 weeks with proper legal counsel. But if you're stalling, if this is just a delay tactic—" "It's not. You have my word." "The word of a man who just sided against his own father?" The man's smile was cruel. "Forgive me if I'm skeptical. Believe what you want, but we're done here." Ethan turned his back on him, dismissive, and walked toward the house. Everyone lower your weapons, now. The ranchers looked at Mr. Vance. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak. Then slowly, he lowered his rifle. The others followed suit. The railroad men withdrew, backing their wagons up and turning them around with careful, deliberate movements. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked away until the last wagon had disappeared down the road and the dust had started to settle. Then Mr. Vance turned on Ethan. You had no right. I had every right. Someone had to stop you from getting us all killed. That was my decision to make. And it was the wrong one. Ethan's voice didn't rise, but there was steel in it now. You want to hate me for it? Fine. But we're alive, and we still have a chance to fight this properly. That's worth whatever you think of me right now. Mr. Vance stared at his son, and Ryan could see something break between them, something that maybe had been cracking for a long time and had finally given way. Get out of my sight, Mr. Vance said, and this time there was no heat in it, just cold, final dismissal. Ethan stood there another moment, then turned and walked toward the barn. His shoulders were straight, his steps steady, but Ryan could see the cost of it in the line of his spine. The ranchers dispersed, muttering among themselves. Mr. Vance went into the house without looking at anyone, and Eleanor, still standing at the window, finally let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for an hour. That boy, she said quietly. That brave, stupid boy. Sarah pushed past Ryan and ran outside, chasing after Ethan. Ryan started to follow, then stopped. This was their family breaking apart, and he was just an observer, an intruder. But when he looked out the window and saw Sarah catch up to Ethan near the barn, saw her throw her arms around him while he stood there rigid and exhausted, Ryan felt something shift inside him, a recognition of what courage actually looked like. Not the loud, aggressive kind that Colt favored, but the quiet kind, the kind that stood alone when it mattered. Ryan found Ethan in the barn an hour later. Sarah had gone back to the house, and Ethan was sitting on a hay bale, his head in his hands. You all right? Ryan asked. Ethan looked up and his eyes were red. Do I look all right? No, you look like you just burned down everything you've built with your father. That's because I did. He rubbed his face. He's never going to forgive me for that. Maybe not. But you saved his life, and everyone else's. Did I? Or did I just delay the inevitable? Ethan stood, pacing. They'll come back. The railroad. And next time they'll have more men, more lawyers, more pressure. And my father will still want to fight, and I'll still be standing between him and disaster. So you keep standing. That's what you do. Is it? Ethan turned to face him. You think it's that simple? You think I can just keep defying him, keep tearing this family apart, and somehow everything will work out? I think you did the right thing, and I think that matters, even when it's hard. Ethan studied him for a long moment. You sound like you believe that. I do. My father spent his whole life doing the wrong thing because it was easier, because it felt good in the moment, and it got him hanged. Ryan stepped closer. You're not him. You're not your father either. You're something different, something better. I don't feel better. I feel like I just destroyed my family. Your family was already destroying itself. You just stopped it from taking everyone else down with it. Ethan sat back down, heavily, and Ryan sat beside him. They stayed like that for a while, not talking, just existing in the same space. Finally, Ethan spoke. Thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it. Any time. You're a good man, Ryan called her. Better than you give yourself credit for. Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. They sat in the barn as the sun moved across the sky, and for the first time since arriving at the Vance property, Ryan felt like maybe he belonged somewhere. That feeling lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, Colt came to him with a proposition. Ryan was working in the stable when Colt appeared, a bottle in one hand and that familiar reckless grin on his face. But there was something different underneath it now, something harder and more desperate. I'm leaving, Colt said without preamble. Where? Don't know yet, just away. I can't stay here, not after what happened. Not with Pa looking at me like I'm the disappointment and Ethan being the hero. He took a drink. You should come with me. Ryan set down the brush he'd been using. What? Come with me. We'll head west, find work on another ranch, make our own way. No family expectations. No one judging us for who our fathers were or what we're supposed to be. I can't just leave. Why not? What's keeping you here? A room and 3 meals a day? You can get that anywhere. But out there, he gestured vaguely. Out there, you could be whoever you want to be. It was tempting, more tempting than Ryan wanted to admit. The idea of just riding away from all of this, from the tension and the expectations and the constant weight of being Jack Calder's son. When? Ryan heard himself ask. Tomorrow. Dawn. Meet me by the east pasture. Colt's grin widened. What do you say? Ryan should have said no. Should have told him it was a bad idea, that running away solved nothing. But standing there in the stable with Colt's offer hanging in the air, all he could think about was freedom. I'll think about it, he said. Don't think too long. Opportunity doesn't wait. Colt took another drink and walked out, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. That night, Ryan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Part of him wanted to go. Wanted to see what life could be like away from here, away from the shadow of his father's name. But another part, the part that had watched Ethan stand alone against both his family and the railroad, knew that running was the coward's way. He was still awake when he heard footsteps in the hall, a soft knock on his door. Ryan? Sarah's voice, quiet. Are you awake? He opened the door. She was wearing a nightdress and shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders. Colt talked to you, she said. Not a question. How did you know? Because I know my brother, and I saw the look on your face at dinner. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. You're thinking about going with him. I don't know what I'm thinking. Yes, you do. You're thinking it would be easier to run than to stay and face whatever comes next. Her eyes were sharp in the lamplight. And you're right. It would be easier. But it would also be wrong. Why? What do I owe this family? Nothing. You don't owe us anything. But you owe yourself more than following Colt into whatever disaster he's heading toward. She sat on the edge of his bed. He's not thinking straight. He's hurt and angry, and he wants to burn everything down. If you go with him, you'll just be fuel for that fire. And if I stay, then you have a chance to be something more than Jack Calder's son, more than just another angry boy with no future. She looked at him seriously. Ethan sees something in you, something good. Don't prove him wrong. What if he's wrong? What if I'm exactly what everyone thinks I am? Then staying won't change that, but leaving will confirm it. Sarah stood. Make your own choice, Ryan, but make it for the right reasons. Not because you're scared or angry or because Colt makes it sound like an adventure. She left, and Ryan sat in the dark, torn between two paths. One leading away from everything, promising freedom but delivering only more running. The other staying put, facing whatever came, trying to build something real. When dawn came, gray and cold, Ryan made his decision. He packed his bag, left a note that said, "I'm sorry," and slipped out of the house while everyone was still sleeping. The walk to the east pasture felt like moving through a dream. The world was quiet, except for the sound of his boots on the hard ground and the distant call of a bird he couldn't name. His chest felt tight, his hands shaking slightly. Colt was waiting by the fence line, already mounted on his horse with a second one saddled beside him. When he saw Ryan coming, his whole face lit up. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't either." Colt reached down to help pull him up, and Ryan looked at the offered hand, looked at Colt's grin and the wild hope in his eyes, looked at the road stretching away towards somewhere else, somewhere new. And then he looked back at the house, at the place that had given him shelter when he had nothing, at the family that had taken him in despite his name, despite everything. He thought about Ethan standing alone between two groups of armed men, about Sarah sitting on his bed in the middle of the night, telling him he could be more, about Eleanor's rigid control and Mr. Vance's hard expectations and all of it, the whole complicated mess of trying to survive in this harsh place. "I can't," Ryan said. Colt's smile faltered. "What?" "I can't go with you. I'm sorry, but this is wrong, and I think you know it." "It's not wrong. It's freedom." "No, it's not. It's running away. And I'm done running." Ryan stepped back. "You should stay too. Work this out with your father, with Ethan. Running doesn't solve anything." "You sound like my brother." Maybe your brother's right. Colt stared at him, and something ugly crossed his face. Fine. Stay here and be their good little charity case. See how far that gets you. Colt? Save it. He kicked his horse into motion, leading the second horse away. Hope it's worth it, Calder. Ryan watched him ride east as the sun came up, painting the land in shades of gold and red. And he felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but certainty. He'd made his choice. He turned and walked back toward the house, toward whatever came next. Eleanor was in the kitchen when he came in through the back door. She looked at him, at the bag in his hand, and her expression didn't change. You're still here, she said. Yes, ma'am. Colt leave? Yes, ma'am. She nodded, went back to kneading dough. Good. That boy needs to figure himself out without dragging anyone else down with him. You don't seem surprised. I raised 3 children in this territory. Nothing surprises me anymore. She paused. But I'm glad you stayed. You're starting to fit here. It was the closest thing to approval Ryan had ever gotten from her. He took it and went upstairs to unpack his bag. Later that morning, Ethan found him in the barn. Sarah told me about last night, about Colt's offer. She talks a lot, your sister. She does, but she's usually right. Ethan leaned against the stall door. Thank you for staying. Don't thank me yet. I don't know if I made the right choice. Neither do I, but you made a choice, and that's what matters. Ethan was quiet for a moment. My father's still angry, at me, at the situation, at everything, but he's agreed to the meeting with the railroad lawyers, so we've got a chance. That's good. Yeah, it is. He looked at Ryan seriously. Whatever happens next, whatever comes with the railroad or my father or any of it, I want you to know you've got a place here. Not as charity, as family. Ryan felt something crack in his chest. I'm not family. You could be, if you want to be. He didn't know what to say to that. So he just nodded, and Ethan smiled and walked away, and Ryan stood in the barn feeling like maybe, for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. That feeling lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks of work and waiting. 2 weeks of watching Mr. Vance avoid Ethan and Eleanor try to hold everything together with sheer force of will. 2 weeks of Sarah talking to Ryan in the barn about books and ideas and all the things she wanted to do if she ever got out of this place. Then Colt came back. Ryan was in the yard when he heard the horse. He looked up and saw Colt riding down the drive, slumped in the saddle, his clothes torn and dirty. Even from a distance, he could see something was wrong with the way he moved. He ran toward the house, shouting for Ethan. They reached Colt together as he was sliding off the horse. Ethan caught him before he hit the ground, and that's when Ryan saw the blood. His shirt was soaked with it on the left side, and his face was gray beneath the dirt. What happened? Ethan demanded. Got shot. Colt's voice was weak, slurred. Couple days ago. Been riding since. Why didn't you stop somewhere? Get help? Couldn't. Men I was with, they figured out I was leaving, shot me and left me for dead. His eyes found Ryan. You were right. Should have stayed. Save your strength, Ethan said, half carrying him toward the house. Pa, Sarah, anyone. Mr. Vance met them at the door. He took one look at Colt and his face went white. Get him inside. Eleanor. They laid Colt on the kitchen table. Eleanor appeared with clean towels and water, her face grim but steady. She cut away his shirt, revealing the wound. A bullet hole in his side, still bleeding, the flesh around it swollen and infected. This needs a doctor, she said. No doctors, Colt muttered. Can't trust them. You'll die if we don't get this treated properly. Then I'll die. He tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back down. Wouldn't be the worst thing. Ryan stood at the edge of the room, watching, and felt like he was seeing his own future. This is what happened when you ran, when you chose the easy path over the right one. You ended up bleeding on a table, half dead and full of regrets. But he also saw the family surrounding Colt. Mr. Vance's white face, Eleanor's steady hands, Ethan's quiet strength, Sarah's tears. They didn't abandon him. Even after he'd left, even after he'd made every wrong choice, they didn't let him die alone. And Ryan understood then what family really meant. Not the absence of mistakes, but the refusal to give up on each other despite them. He stepped forward. "I'll ride to town. Get the doctor. Bring him back." "It's dangerous," Ethan said. "If those men are still looking for Colt, then I'll be careful, but we need help and I can get it." Mr. Vance looked at Ryan, really looked at him for the first time since he'd arrived. "You'd do that? For him?" "For all of you," Ryan said. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. This is me giving something back." Mr. Vance nodded slowly. "Ride fast and be careful." Ryan ran. The ride to town was the longest 15 miles of Ryan's life. He pushed the horse hard, harder than he should have, but every time he thought about slowing down, he saw Colt's gray face and the blood soaking through Eleanor's towels. The sun beat down merciless, and the dust kicked up by the hooves coated his throat until every breath tasted like dirt. He found Doc Morrison in his office above the general store, a graying man with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much. Ryan barely got the words out before the doctor was grabbing his bag. "Gunshot wound, you said?" "In the side. He's been riding for days with it. Looks infected." Morrison swore under his breath. "Get my horse saddled. We leave in 5 minutes." They rode back faster than Ryan had come, the doctor keeping pace despite his age. They didn't talk much. There wasn't time for talking. When they arrived, Ethan met them at the door. "He's still alive, barely. Ma's been doing what she can, but out of my way, son," Morrison said, pushing past into the kitchen. Ryan followed, then stopped in the doorway. Colt was still on the table, but he looked worse than when Ryan had left. His skin had gone from gray to almost translucent, and the towels around the wound were soaked dark red. Morrison worked in silence, his movements quick and efficient. He examined the wound, probed it with instruments that made Colt scream even though he was barely conscious, then finally pulled back. "Bullet's deep. I can get it out, but he's lost a lot of blood. And this infection?" He shook his head. "Even if I get the bullet, even if I clean the wound, there's no guarantee." "Do it anyway," Mr. Vance said. His voice was rough, almost broken. "Please." Morrison nodded. "I'll need whiskey for the pain, and someone to hold him down. This isn't going to be pleasant." Ethan and Mr. Vance held Colt's shoulders. Sarah was sent from the room despite her protests. Eleanor stood at the doctor's side, handing him instruments, her face pale but composed. Ryan stayed in the doorway, unable to look away. Morrison poured whiskey over the wound, and Colt's back arched off the table, a scream tearing from his throat that didn't sound human. Then the knife went in and the screaming got worse. Ryan had seen violence before, had watched his father beat men senseless over card games and territory disputes. But this was different. This was surgical, purposeful, and somehow more brutal because of it. The doctor worked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, he held up the bullet, dark and misshapen, and dropped it into a basin with a clink. "Got it. Now the hard part." He cleaned the wound with more whiskey, and Colt passed out somewhere in the middle of it. Maybe from the pain, maybe from the blood loss. Ryan couldn't tell and wasn't sure it mattered. When Morrison finally stepped back, his hands were covered in blood and his face was grim. "Best I can do, keep the wound clean, change the dressing twice a day. If the fever doesn't break in 48 hours... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "What do we owe you?" Mr. Vance asked. "Nothing. Just keep that boy alive." Morrison wiped his hands on a towel. "And keep him away from whatever trouble he got into. He won't survive another wound like this." After the doctor left, they moved Colt to his room. 4 of them carried him, careful not to jostle the wound, and laid him on the bed. Eleanor shooed everyone out except herself, saying she'd sit with him. Ryan found himself in the hallway with Ethan and Mr. Vance, all 3 of them covered in varying amounts of Colt's blood. "You did good," Mr. Vance said, looking at Ryan. "Riding for the doctor, that took courage." "Anyone would have done it?" "No, they wouldn't have." The older man's eyes were red-rimmed. "I misjudged you, boy. Thought you were just another version of your father. But you're not. You're something better." It was the first kind thing Mr. Vance had ever said to him. Ryan didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. "Get cleaned up," Ethan said quietly. "Then try to rest. It's going to be a long night." But Ryan couldn't rest. He paced his room, then the hallway, then finally ended up in the barn where he'd spent so much time working. Sarah found him there an hour later. "I knew you'd be here," she said. "Couldn't sleep." Neither could I. She sat on a hay bale, her dress stained with her brother's blood. He's gonna die, isn't he? I don't know. Yes, you do. I can see it in your face. The doctor didn't say it, but you could tell. Her voice cracked. My brother's going to die because he's too stubborn and stupid to stay in one place. Ryan sat beside her. He might make it. He's strong. Strong doesn't matter when you're bleeding out from the inside. She looked at him, and her eyes were wet. Why did you come back? That morning when Colt wanted you to leave. Why didn't you go? Because running away doesn't solve anything. It just moves the problem somewhere else. And staying here does? I don't know. But at least here I'm trying. At least here I've got people who... He stopped, not sure how to finish. Who care about you? Sarah finished. You can say it. It's not weakness to admit you need people. Your mother would disagree. My mother's terrified of needing anyone. It's why she's so hard all the time. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, and Ryan froze. Thank you for going to get the doctor, for not giving up on Colt even though he gave up on himself. He's your brother. Of course I'd help. He's also the person who's been making your life miserable since you got here. You could have let him die. Nobody would have blamed you. Ryan thought about that, about how easy it would have been to ride slow, to take his time, to arrive just a little too late. But the thought made him sick. That's not who I want to be, he said finally. I know. It's why I'm glad you stayed. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just existing together in the quiet barn. Finally, Sarah stood. I should go check on him, see if Mother needs help. Sarah, she turned back. He's going to fight, Colt. He's too mean to die easy. She smiled, small and sad. I hope you're right. The next 2 days were hell. Colt drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes raving with fever. Eleanor barely left his side, changing dressings, forcing water down his throat, watching for signs of improvement that didn't come. Mr. Vance threw himself into work, spending 18-hour days on the ranch like he could outrun his fear. Ethan divided his time between helping his father and sitting with Colt, reading to him from books even though Colt couldn't hear. And Ryan worked. He took on extra tasks, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from imagining what would happen if Colt died. If the first person who'd actually challenged him, who'd seen through his act and called him on it, just stopped existing. On the third day, the fever broke. Ryan was in the barn when Sarah came running, her face flushed with relief. He's awake. Really awake. And he asked for water. She grabbed Ryan's hand. Come on. He wants to see you. Colt looked terrible. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his skin still too pale. But he was conscious and coherent, and when Ryan entered the room, he managed a weak smile. You look like hell, Calder. Says the man who almost died on the kitchen table. Fair point. Colt shifted, winced at the pain. Sarah told me what you did, writing for the doc. Probably saved my life. Probably. Why? Ryan pulled up a chair and sat. Because you're an idiot, but you don't deserve to die for it. That got a short laugh that turned into a cough. There's the honesty I missed. Colt's expression turned serious. I'm sorry for asking you to leave, for making it seem like running was the answer. You were trying to help in your own broken way. I was trying to drag you down with me. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. You made the right choice, staying, being better than I could be. I'm not better, just different. Yeah, different. Colt closed his eyes. I'm tired, Ryan. Tired of fighting everything. Tired of being angry. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. You've got time now. Do I? Doc says I'm lucky to be alive. Next time I might not be. Then don't let there be a next time. Colt opened his eyes and looked at him. You really think I can change? I think you can try. That's all any of us can do. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. That's enough talking. He needs rest. Ryan stood. I'll come back later. Ryan, Colt's voice stopped him. Thank you for not giving up on me. Anytime. Colt recovered slowly. Weeks passed, and he went from barely conscious to sitting up to taking short walks around his room. The wound healed, leaving a jagged scar that he'd carry forever. During those weeks, the railroad meeting happened. Ethan rode to town with a lawyer they'd hired and came back with an agreement. The railroad would shift its line 5 miles south, missing their land entirely. They'd pay compensation to the families affected. It wasn't everything they'd wanted, but it was fair. Mr. Vance heard the news in silence, then nodded once. "You did good, son." It was the first kind thing he'd said to Ethan since the confrontation. Not quite forgiveness, but a start. By the time Colt was strong enough to come downstairs, something had shifted in the house. The tension was still there. That never completely went away. But underneath it was something else. A tentative peace. Ryan was in the kitchen helping Eleanor with dinner when Colt walked in, still moving carefully. "Smells good," Colt said. Eleanor turned, and for just a second her rigid control cracked. Her eyes welled up, and she crossed the room and pulled Colt into a careful hug. "Don't you ever do that again," she said fiercely. "Don't you ever make me think I'm going to lose you." "I'll try, Ma. I'll try." That night at dinner, the whole family gathered for the first time in weeks. Mr. Vance at the head of the table, Eleanor at the foot, Ethan and Sarah on one side, Colt and Ryan on the other. "I have an announcement," Mr. Vance said, "about the ranch." Everyone looked up. "I'm getting old, and the last few months have shown me I don't have the temperament for this anymore. For dealing with railroads and lawyers and all the rest of it." He looked at Ethan. "So I'm turning over day-to-day operations to you, effective immediately." Ethan stared at his father. "Pa, I don't—" "You do. You've proven you can make the hard choices, that you can see past pride and anger to what actually needs to be done. That's what this place needs." "What about Colt?" "Colt's got his own path to figure out. Don't you, son?" Colt nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I do." "And what about me?" Sarah asked. Mr. Vance looked at his daughter, and something softened in his face. "You're smart, Sarah. Smarter than any of us. When you're ready, when you've figured out what you want, we'll make it happen. I promise." Sarah blinked back tears. "Thank you, Father." "Don't thank me yet. You might change your mind when you see how much work running a ranch actually is." He turned to Ryan. "And you. You've proven yourself 10 times over. You're family now, if you want to be. No more charity, no more obligation, just family." Ryan felt his throat tighten. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. We could use someone like you around here, someone who sees things clearly and isn't afraid to do the right thing even when it's hard." "Then yes." "Thank you." They ate dinner, and for the first time since Ryan had arrived, it felt like a real family meal. Not perfect. Nothing about the Vances would ever be perfect. But real. After dinner, Ryan found himself on the back porch with Ethan, watching the sunset. "You all right?" Ethan asked. "Yeah, just processing. It's a lot. I know." "Your father, turning things over to you, that's huge. Terrifying is what it is." Ethan leaned against the railing. "But I'll figure it out, with help." "You'll be good at it. You're already good at it." "We'll see." He looked at Ryan. "What about you? What do you want out of all this?" Ryan thought about that. A month ago, he would have said he just wanted to survive, to get through each day without being reminded of his father, without being judged for a name he hadn't chosen. But now? "I want to build something," he said. "I want to prove that I'm more than Jack Calder's son, that I can be part of something good." "You already are. You just need to believe it." They stood in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to red to purple. 3 months later, riders came to the property. 6 men, hard-looking, wearing badges that glinted in the afternoon sun. Ryan saw them from the barn and felt his stomach drop. He found Ethan in the house. "We've got visitors. Law." Ethan's face went pale. "Stay inside. I'll handle this." But Ryan followed him out anyway, stood on the porch while Ethan went down to meet the marshal. "Marshal Hawkins," the lead man said, showing his badge. "We're investigating some incidents near Red Creek. Robberies, assaults. We got reports of a young man matching Colt Vance's description being involved." "My brother's been here recovering from a gunshot wound for months," Ethan said calmly. "He hasn't been to Red Creek or anywhere else?" "That wound wouldn't happen to be from one of those incidents, would it? It would happen to be from him getting shot by men he was foolish enough to trust, men who left him for dead." The marshal studied Ethan. "We'd like to talk to him, verify his story. He's not well enough for questioning." "We'll be gentle." Mr. Vance appeared on the porch. "What's this about?" They want to question Colt about some robberies, Ethan said. My son's been here for months. He's got nothing to do with whatever you're investigating. Then you won't mind us talking to him. The marshal's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. They brought Colt downstairs. He was thinner now, still recovering, but steady on his feet. He looked at the badges and something flickered across his face. Not fear exactly, more like resignation. Colt Vance? The marshal asked. That's me. You know anything about some robberies near Red Creek? Stagecoaches, travelers, that sort of thing? No, sir. I was in Red Creek a while back, got mixed up with some bad men, and got shot for my trouble. Been here recovering ever since. These bad men have names? If they did, I didn't get them. I was just passing through looking for work. They seemed like they might have some. Turned out they wanted me for things I wasn't interested in doing. Colt met the marshal's eyes. So they shot me when I tried to leave. It was smooth, calm, almost believable. The marshal didn't look convinced. Anyone vouch for that story? I can, Ryan said, stepping forward. I saw him ride in here half dead, helped get the doctor. He's been here recovering ever since. And who are you? Ryan Calder. I work here. The marshal's eyes narrowed. Calder. Any relation to Jack Calder? He was my father. Interesting company you keep, Mr. Vance, the marshal said to Ethan, the son of an outlaw vouching for another possible outlaw. Ryan's not his father, Ethan said, his voice hard. And Colt's telling the truth. If you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, present it. Otherwise, you're done here. The marshal stared at them all, clearly frustrated. Finally, he nodded. We'll be keeping an eye on things. If I find out any of you are lying, you won't, Ethan said, because we're not. The lawman left, and Ryan felt the tension drain out of him. That was close, Colt said quietly. Too close, Mr. Vance agreed. You need to stay out of trouble, boy. For real this time. I know, Pa. I know. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the marshal's visit, about how close they'd come to disaster, about how one wrong word could have destroyed everything they'd built. He was sitting on his bed when there was a knock at the door. It's me, Colt's voice. Can I come in? Ryan opened the door. Colt looked tired, older somehow. You lied for me today, Colt said, with the marshal. I told him what I saw, you riding in half dead. You know what I mean? You backed my story even though you didn't know if it was true. It was true enough. Colt was quiet for a moment. Why? Why risk yourself for me? Ryan thought about that. Because that's what family does. They stand together, even when it's hard, even when maybe they shouldn't. I don't deserve that. Probably not, but you're getting it anyway. Ryan looked at him seriously. Don't make me regret it. I'll try not to. Colt started to leave, then stopped. I'm going to change, Ryan. For real this time. I'm going to be someone my family can be proud of. Someone I can be proud of. Good. Because I'm tired of worrying about whether you're going to die or get arrested. That got a small laugh. Yeah, me too. After Colt left, Ryan lay back down and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his father, hanging in the town square, about all the choices that had led to that moment, about how different his life might have been if Jack Calder had made even one different choice along the way. And he thought about the choice he'd made today, to stand with Colt, to vouch for him, to be part of this family even when it was complicated and messy and maybe dangerous. It was the right choice. He was sure of that now. The months that followed were quieter. Colt threw himself into ranch work with a focus Ryan had never seen from him before. Ethan settled into running operations, making changes that modernized the place without abandoning its core. Sarah started taking lessons from a tutor in town, preparing for something bigger, though she wouldn't say what yet. And Ryan worked alongside them all, learning the land, earning his place not through his name, but through his actions. 1 year after he'd arrived at the Vance property, Ryan stood on the back porch watching the sun set and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of problems. The Vances still had plenty of those, but the certainty that he belonged somewhere, that he'd found people worth fighting for, worth staying for. Ethan joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. Thinking about anything in particular? Ethan asked. Just how different things are from when I got here. Better or worse? Better. Definitely better. Good. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you stayed, Ryan. I don't think I've ever said that clearly enough. But I'm glad. Me too. They stood there as the sky turned dark and the stars came out, and Ryan thought about all the paths that had led him here. The wrong choices and the right ones, the running and the staying, the fear and the courage. He thought about his father's watch, still stopped at the moment of his death, sitting in a drawer upstairs. And he thought about how time kept moving forward anyway, regardless of the past. How every day was a chance to be better than yesterday. How maybe, just maybe, he could be someone his father never managed to be. Someone good. The seasons changed, and with them, the land. Winter came hard that year, burying the property under 3 feet of snow and forcing everyone inside for weeks at a time. Ryan spent those long, dark months learning to read and write properly under Sarah's patient instruction, sitting by the fire while the wind howled outside and Eleanor mended clothes and Ethan pored over account books. Colt was different now, quieter. He still had that edge of recklessness, but it was tempered by something else. Caution, maybe, or just the bone-deep understanding of what it felt like to almost die. He worked harder than anyone, as if trying to make up for lost time, and slowly, so slowly Ryan almost didn't notice it happening, Mr. Vance started looking at him with something other than disappointment. Spring came late and brought the thaw with it. The land turned from white to brown to green, and with the warming weather came news from town. The railroad had finished its line 5 miles south, just as agreed. Prosperity followed the tracks. New settlements, new trade, new opportunities. The Vance Ranch thrived, selling cattle to the boom towns that sprouted up along the route. Ethan proved to be a natural leader. Where his father had ruled through force of will and intimidation, Ethan led through fairness and strategy. The neighboring ranchers respected him. Even the men in town who'd been skeptical of the Vances started coming around, seeing how Ethan's methods brought stability to the whole region. But with prosperity came new problems. It started with cattle going missing. Just a few head at first, easy to chalk up to wolves or wandering. But then it became a pattern. Over the course of 3 months, they lost nearly 30 head from the south pasture. Someone's stealing them, Mr. Vance said one night at dinner, his fist coming down on the table. And I want to know who. We don't know that for certain, Ethan said. Could be. It's theft, plain and simple. And we need to do something about it. Ryan kept quiet, but he'd been thinking the same thing. He'd spent enough time around his father's associates to recognize the signs. This wasn't random. Someone was systematically taking their cattle, and they were good at it. I'll ride the south pasture at night, Colt offered. See if I can catch them in the act. Not alone you won't, Ethan said. If these are rustlers, they'll be armed and dangerous. Then come with me. I've got the meeting with the cattle buyers in Denver. I can't postpone it. Ethan looked at Ryan. What about you? You up for some night riding? Ryan felt everyone's eyes turn to him. This was a test, he realized, not of his loyalty, that had been proven, but of his courage, his willingness to face danger for the family. I'm in, he said. They rode out that night, Ryan and Colt, armed with rifles and enough coffee to stay awake until dawn. The south pasture was a sprawling expanse of grassland dotted with rocky outcroppings, perfect for hiding. They found a position on high ground that gave them a view of most of the herd and settled in to wait. For the first few hours, nothing happened. The cattle grazed peacefully under the stars, and Ryan found himself fighting to stay awake despite the coffee. You ever think about leaving? Colt asked suddenly, his voice quiet in the darkness. What do you mean? I mean really leaving, not running away like I did, but just moving on, making your own way somewhere else. Ryan thought about it. Sometimes. But then I remember what I'd be leaving behind. And what's that? People who care whether I live or die. A place where my name is starting to mean something other than Outlaw's son. He glanced at Colt. Why? You thinking about leaving again? No, the opposite, actually. I'm thinking about staying, really staying, not just recovering here until something better comes along, but putting down roots, building something that lasts. Colt was quiet for a moment. I'm thinking about asking Pa if I can start a horse breeding program. We've got the land, the facilities, and I'm good with horses. Always have been. That's a good idea. You think he'd go for it? I think Ethan would support it, and your father listens to Ethan now. Yeah, he does. Colt's voice held something Ryan couldn't quite identify. Not jealousy exactly, more like acceptance. Ethan's good at this, running things, making people feel heard. Pa was never good at that, too stubborn. Wonder where you got it from? That got a short laugh. Fair point. Movement caught Ryan's eye. Down in the pasture near the far edge, shadows were moving, not cattle, men on horseback. Colt, he whispered. 3 o'clock. They watched as 4 riders moved among the herd, working quickly and efficiently. They cut out 6 head and started driving them toward the southern boundary. We need to stop them, Colt said, already moving toward his horse. Wait, there's 4 of them and 2 of us. So? So we're not gunslingers, we're ranchers. Ryan grabbed his arm. Let's follow them. See where they're taking the cattle. Then we can come back with help and get our property back, plus whoever's buying from them. Colt looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. All right, your way. But if shooting starts, then we shoot back. But let's not start it. They followed the rustlers for 3 miles, keeping far enough back to avoid detection. The thieves drove the cattle to an old abandoned homestead Ryan had seen before, but never paid much attention to. It sat in a small valley, hidden from the main roads, perfect for hiding stolen livestock. The rustlers penned the cattle and went into the rundown house. Smoke started rising from the chimney. They're settling in for the night, Ryan whispered. We should head back. Tell Ethan what we found. But before they could move, another rider appeared, coming from the opposite direction. Even in the darkness, Ryan could see he was well-dressed, expensive horse, not a rustler's usual profile. The man went into the house. Voices drifted out, too low to make out words, but clearly arguing about something. I want to get closer, Colt said. Hear what they're saying. That's suicide. No, that's information. Come on. Against his better judgment, Ryan followed. They crept down the hillside, using the rocks and scrub for cover, until they were close enough to hear the conversation through the open window. Told you to be more careful, the well-dressed man was saying. You're taking too many head too fast. People are noticing. We're just doing what you paid us for, one of the rustlers responded. You want more cattle? This is how we get them. I want sustainable supply, not a trail that leads back to me. The Vance Ranch is too prominent. If they bring in the law, they won't. Ambrose Vance doesn't trust the law any more than we do. He'll handle this his own way, and we'll be long gone before he figures it out. You better hope you're right, because if this blows back on me, I'll make sure every one of you hangs for it. The well-dressed man walked out, mounted his horse, and rode off into the night. Ryan and Colt waited until his hoofbeats faded, then crept back up the hill. Did you recognize that voice? Colt asked when they were safely away. No, but he sounded educated, rich, not the kind of person who usually runs cattle rustling operations. We need to tell Pa and Ethan about this, tonight. They rode hard back to the ranch, arriving just before dawn. The house was dark, everyone still asleep, but they pounded on the door until light started coming on. Mr. Vance appeared first, rifle in hand, looking ready for trouble. When he saw it was just Colt and Ryan, he lowered the weapon. This better be important. It is, Colt said. We found the rustlers, and we found out who's behind it. They gathered in the kitchen. Mr. Vance, Ethan, Eleanor, and Sarah, who refused to be sent back to bed. Ryan and Colt took turns explaining what they'd seen and heard. When they finished, Mr. Vance's face was dark with anger. Someone in town is organizing this, someone with money and connections. That's what it sounded like, Ryan confirmed. Then we go to the sheriff, get the law involved, Ethan said. No. Mr. Vance shook his head. If this man has money and connections, he probably has the sheriff in his pocket too. We handle this ourselves. Pa, we can't just... I said we handle it ourselves. The old man's fist came down on the table. I'm tired of playing by their rules, tired of trusting the law to do what's right. We know where they are. We know what they're doing. We end this tonight. If we go in shooting, people will die, Ethan said quietly. And it might be us. Then it might be us. But I'm not letting someone steal from my family and walk away clean. Ryan watched the familiar argument building, saw Ethan's jaw tighten and Colt's eyes light up with the prospect of action. But before either could speak, Sarah stood up. "There's another way," she said. Everyone turned to look at her. "What way?" Mr. Vance asked. "We don't know who the man in the expensive suit is, but we know he's coming back. He has to if he wants to keep the operation running." Sarah's eyes were sharp with thought. "So we wait. We watch. And when he comes back, we follow him. Find out who he is, where he lives, what his business is. Then we have leverage." "Leverage?" Mr. Vance scoffed. "What good is leverage when they're stealing our cattle?" "Leverage is everything, Father. If we know who he is, we can threaten to expose him, ruin his reputation. A man with money and connections has more to lose than just profit from stolen cattle. He has his standing in the community, his business relationships, everything he's built." Ethan was nodding slowly. "She's right. If we can identify him, we can force him to not only stop but make restitution, without firing a single shot." "And if he refuses?" Colt asked. "Then we take it to the territorial authorities, skip the local sheriff entirely, go straight to the marshal's office in the capital." Sarah looked at her father. "But we do this smart, not with guns." Mr. Vance sat back in his chair, and Ryan could see the war happening behind his eyes. The old way versus the new. Violence versus strategy. "How long would we have to wait?" he asked finally. "That man said he'd be back," Ryan said. "Could be days, could be weeks." "We watch in shifts," Ethan proposed. "Keep someone near that homestead at all times. When he shows up, we follow him." "I don't like it," Mr. Vance said. "Too much waiting, too much chance for them to slip away." "But less chance of anyone dying," Eleanor said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken. "These children have already seen too much violence, Ambrose. Let them try it their way." The old man looked at his wife, and something passed between them that Ryan couldn't read. Finally, he nodded. 1 week. We try it Sarah's way for 1 week. If it doesn't work, we do it mine." They organized watches, 2 people at a time rotating every 6 hours, positioned where they could see the homestead without being seen. Ryan took the first shift with Colt, then came back and slept while Ethan and Sarah took over, then Mr. Vance and one of the ranch hands. 3 days passed. The rustlers came and went, bringing more stolen cattle. They were getting bolder, taking bigger groups. Ryan counted at least 40 head now in the makeshift pens. On the 4th day, the well-dressed man returned. Ryan and Colt were on watch when they saw him riding in. Same expensive horse, same fine clothes. He dismounted and went into the house. "I'm going closer," Ryan said. "See if I can get a better look at him." "I'll come with you." "No, someone needs to be ready to ride if this goes bad. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, go get help." Before Colt could argue, Ryan was moving down the hillside. He worked his way around to the side of the house where a window stood partially open. Voices drifted out. "You're taking too much," the well-dressed man was saying. "I told you to be subtle." "You also told us to make it worth our while," one of the rustlers shot back. "Can't do both." "You can and you will. I have business interests in this territory that can't afford this kind of attention." "Then pay us more. Double what we agreed on, and we'll slow down." "That's extortion." "Call it what you want, but those are the terms." Ryan heard a chair scrape back. The well-dressed man was leaving. Ryan scrambled back into cover just as the door opened. The man emerged, and for the first time Ryan got a clear look at his face. He was maybe 40, with a neat beard and hard eyes. Well-fed, well-groomed, the kind of man who did his violence through intermediaries. But there was something familiar about him. Something Ryan couldn't quite place. The man mounted his horse and rode north toward town. Ryan waited until he was out of sight, then ran back up the hill to where Colt was waiting. "Did you see him?" "Yeah, and I think I've seen him before, in town maybe. I don't know." Ryan climbed onto his horse. "Come on. We need to follow him before we lose him." They trailed the man at a distance, careful to stay out of sight. He rode straight to town, to one of the nicer buildings on the main street. A sign above the door read, "Western Freight and Holdings, Marcus Webb, proprietor." "Marcus Webb," Colt breathed. "He's on the town council, part owner of the bank. I've seen him at church. He's also stealing our cattle and selling them to the boom towns along the railroad," Ryan said. "Come on, we need to tell your father." The confrontation happened 2 days later, after they'd spent time gathering more information about Marcus Webb. Turned out he owned several businesses in town, had investments in the railroad, and was widely respected as a pillar of the community. He was also apparently supplementing his income by rustling cattle from ranchers who'd opposed the railroad's initial route. Ethan, Mr. Vance, and Colt rode into town with Ryan. Sarah had wanted to come, but Eleanor had put her foot down, saying this was men's business. Sarah had argued, lost, and settled for making them promise to tell her everything. They walked into Webb's office without knocking. The man looked up from his desk, startled, then composed himself quickly. "Gentlemen, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "You know exactly what," Mr. Vance said. "We want our cattle back. All of them." "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult our intelligence," Ethan said calmly. "We know about the homestead. We know about the rustlers. We know you've been organizing the whole operation." Webb's expression didn't change. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof?" "We have witnesses. We have seen you at the homestead. We have records of the cattle you've sold through your freight company, cattle that match the descriptions of our missing stock." Ethan pulled out a folder of documents. "We've been thorough, Mr. Webb." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Webb's face. "What do you want?" "Our cattle returned. Compensation for our losses. And your word that this stops immediately." "And if I refuse?" "Then we take this to the territorial marshal, along with evidence of your involvement. See how your business partners and investors feel about backing a cattle thief." Ethan leaned forward. "You'll be ruined, Mr. Webb. Everything you've built, gone, and you'll probably hang for it." Webb sat back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "You're bluffing." "Try us," Colt said, and there was enough menace in his voice that Webb actually flinched. The silence stretched out. Finally, Webb sighed. "How much compensation are we talking about?" They negotiated for an hour. In the end, Webb agreed to return all the cattle, pay market value for the ones already sold, and donate a substantial sum to the church to avoid prosecution. The rustlers would be paid off and sent out of the territory. The operation would end. It wasn't perfect justice. Ryan could see that Mr. Vance wanted to see Webb arrested, tried, punished publicly. But it was practical justice, the kind that got results without getting people killed. As they were leaving, Webb stopped them at the door. "You know this doesn't change anything," he said. "Men like me, we always land on our feet. I'll rebuild. And next time, I'll be more careful." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But you'll do it somewhere else. Because if you ever threaten my family again, I won't negotiate. I'll destroy you. Completely. Do we understand each other?" Webb looked at Ethan for a long moment, then nodded. "We do." They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Sarah was waiting on the porch. "Well?" she demanded. "It worked," Ethan said. "Your plan worked. We got our cattle back, got compensation, and ended the rustling. No one got shot." Sarah's face broke into a wide smile. "I told you strategy beats violence." "This time," Mr. Vance said, but there was grudging respect in his voice. "This time it did." That night, there was a celebration. Eleanor cooked a feast, and the whole family gathered around the table like they had that first night Ryan had arrived. Except now everything was different. Now he was part of it, not an outsider looking in. After dinner, Ryan found himself on the back porch again, watching the stars come out. Footsteps approached, and Ethan joined him. "You did good work," Ethan said. "With the rustlers, staying patient, gathering information instead of charging in. I learned from watching you." "Maybe, but you've got good instincts of your own." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about the future, about what happens when Pa's really gone, when it's just me running this place. You'll be fine, better than fine. I'll need help, someone I can trust completely, someone who knows the land and the work, but also understands that there are different ways to solve problems." Ethan looked at him. "I want you to be my partner, Ryan. Not just a hand, not just family, an actual partner in running this ranch." Ryan's throat went tight. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll help me build something here, something that lasts, something we can both be proud of." "What about Colt?" "Colt's going to start his horse breeding program. It's what he's good at, what he cares about. He doesn't want to run the ranch any more than I want to break horses." Ethan smiled. "We all have our strengths. This is yours." Ryan thought about his father again. About Jack Calder, who'd never built anything, never created anything that lasted, who'd spent his whole life taking and running and destroying until there was nothing left but a rope and a crowd. This was different. This was building, creating, making something that would outlast them all. "Yes," Ryan said, "I'll be your partner." They shook hands, and it felt like sealing something more than a business arrangement. It felt like sealing a future. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under Ethan and Ryan's joint leadership. Colt's horse breeding program became renowned across the territory, bringing in income that exceeded the cattle sales some years. Sarah eventually went east to school, came back with a teaching certificate, and opened a school for girls in town. Scandalous at first, but eventually accepted and even celebrated. Eleanor grew older gracefully, her rigid control softening into something that almost looked like contentment. Mr. Vance lived to see his grandchildren. Ethan married a banker's daughter from Denver, and their first son was born 2 years after the rustling incident, and Ryan became someone new. Not Jack Calder's son, though he never denied who his father was, but Ryan Vance, partner in the most successful ranch in 3 territories. Ryan Vance, who the town council consulted on disputes. Ryan Vance, who Sarah's schoolchildren looked up to as proof that you could rise above your circumstances. 5 years after he'd arrived at the Vance property, broken and desperate and carrying nothing but a bag and a name he couldn't escape, Ryan stood on a hill overlooking the land and felt something he'd never felt before. Pride. Not the loud, aggressive pride his father had shown, but quiet satisfaction. The knowledge that he'd earned his place through work and choices and the slow accumulation of days lived right. Footsteps approached. Colt, leading 2 horses. "Thought you might want to ride the property line," Colt said. "For old times' sake." "Old times? It's only been 5 years." "Feels like longer. Feels like a whole different life." Colt mounted his horse. "You ever think about him? Your father?" "Sometimes. Less than I used to." "What do you think when you do?" Ryan thought about that as he climbed into the saddle. "I think he wasted his life. All that anger, all that violence, and for what? He died alone and hated with nothing to show for his time on Earth, except a son who spent years trying not to be him. And now? Now I think I've finally succeeded." Ryan looked at Colt. "What about you? You think about who you were when I first got here?" "All the time. That angry, reckless kid who thought violence was the answer to everything." Colt's expression was serious. "I'm glad he's gone. I like who I am now better." "Me too, on both counts." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, checking fences and water sources and all the mundane tasks that made up ranch life. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the adventure young Ryan had sometimes dreamed about, but it was real, and it was his, and that was enough. When they returned to the house, a rider was waiting. He wore a marshal's badge and had the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life on the trail. "Mr. Vance?" he asked, looking at Ethan, who'd come out to meet him. "That's me." "I'm looking for a Ryan Calder. Heard he might be here." Ryan's stomach dropped. After all this time, after everything he'd built, was his past finally catching up? He dismounted slowly. "I'm Ryan Calder." The marshal studied him. "You're a hard man to find. Been looking for you for near about 6 months now." "What for?" "Your father had property, down in the Southern Territories. Nothing much, just a small piece of land he won in a card game years back. Apparently put it in your name before he died, trying to make sure you got something." The marshal pulled out some papers. "It's yours, if you want it. About 40 acres, got a creek running through it. Not worth much, but it's yours legal and clear." Ryan took the papers with shaking hands. His father had left him something. Not money, not stolen goods, but actual legitimate property. Jack Calder's one good deed in a lifetime of bad ones. "There's more," the marshal said. "Found some letters with the deed. From your father. Written in the weeks before he died. Think he meant for you to have them, but never got the chance to send them." He handed over a bundle of envelopes, yellowed with age. Ryan stared at them, not sure if he wanted to read what they contained. "Thank you, Marshal." "My pleasure, son. Good luck to you." After the marshal left, Ryan stood in the yard holding his father's last words. Ethan approached carefully. "You all right?" "I don't know." Ryan looked at the letters. "Part of me doesn't want to read them, doesn't want to know what he had to say. And the other part? The other part needs to know, needs to hear it, even if it doesn't change anything. That night, alone in his room, Ryan opened the letters. There were 7 of them, dated over the 3 weeks between Jack Calder's arrest and his execution. The handwriting was rough. His father had never been educated, but the words were clear enough. The first letter was full of excuses, justifications for his crimes, blame placed on everyone else. Ryan almost stopped reading, but something made him continue. The second letter was angrier, railing against the injustice of being caught, of being punished for things he claimed other men did and got away with. But by the third letter, something had shifted. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Regret, maybe. Or just exhaustion. The final letter was different entirely. Ryan read it 3 times, trying to understand what his father had been trying to say. Ryan, I know I wasn't the father you deserved. Hell, I wasn't the man I wanted to be. I let anger drive me, let pride make my choices, and now I'm going to hang for it, which is probably what I deserve. But you, son, you're better than me. Always have been. Even as a boy, you had something I never did. Compassion, understanding, the ability to see past your own anger to what actually matters. Don't be like me. Don't let what I did define who you become. You've got a chance to make something of yourself, to build a life worth living. Take it. Take that land I'm leaving you, or sell it, or burn the deed for all I care. But use it to start something new, something clean. I'm sorry I couldn't be better for you. Sorry I couldn't show you how to be a man instead of just how to be angry. But maybe my being gone will give you the space you need to figure it out yourself. Be good, Ryan. Be better than your old man. It won't be hard. Your father, Jack Calder. Ryan sat with the letter for a long time, feeling things he couldn't quite name. Not forgiveness. His father didn't deserve that. But maybe understanding. Maybe acceptance that Jack Calder had been broken in ways he couldn't fix, and that the best thing he'd ever done was fail to break his son the same way. The next morning, Ryan rode into town and filed the deed for the land his father had left him. 40 acres with a creek running through it. He had no idea what he'd do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe sell it and use the money to expand the horse breeding program. Or maybe someday, build a house there. Start his own family. Create something entirely his own. But that was future thinking. For now, he had work to do. He returned to the ranch to find chaos. Mr. Vance had collapsed while working in the barn. Doc Morrison was there, examining him, while Eleanor stood white-faced and silent. His heart, the doctor said quietly. It's failing. Has been for a while, probably. All that anger and stress finally caught up with him. How long? Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. Days. Maybe a week if he's lucky. They moved Mr. Vance to his bed. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes rambling. The whole family gathered, taking turns sitting with him. On the 3rd day, he called for Ryan. Come here, boy, the old man said, his voice weak. I need to tell you something. Ryan approached the bed. Mr. Vance's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. I was wrong about you. That first day I thought you'd be just like your father, trouble, a burden. But you proved me wrong. His grip tightened. You're a good man, Ryan Calder. Better than I ever gave you credit for. Better than I deserved to have in my house. You gave me a chance when no one else would. I gave you a roof. You did everything else yourself. He coughed, and Eleanor was there immediately with water. After drinking, he continued. Take care of them. Ethan, he's smart, but he second-guesses himself. Colt, he's better now, but he'll always have that darkness in him. And Sarah, she's got dreams bigger than this place can hold. They'll need someone steady, someone who knows where he came from and chose something better anyway. I'll do my best. I know you will. It's why I can rest now. Mr. Vance's eyes closed. It's why I can let go. He died that night, peacefully, with Eleanor holding his hand and his children surrounding his bed. They buried him on the property under an old oak tree he'd planted when he first claimed the land 40 years earlier. The funeral was attended by half the territory. Ranchers and townspeople, even some of the railroad men who'd opposed him, came to pay respects. Whatever his faults, Ambrose Vance had been a force in this land, and his passing marked the end of an era. Afterward, the family gathered in the house. Ethan read the will. Most everything went to him as the eldest, with substantial provisions for Colt's horse program and Sarah's school. But there was a surprise. To Ryan Calder, who came to us broken and leaves us whole. I leave the north 40 acres adjoining his own property, and a partnership interest in the ranch equal to my son Ethan's. He has earned it 1,000 times over. Ryan felt tears sting his eyes. Mr. Vance had given him equality, had made him truly family in the eyes of the law, not just in word. He cared about you, Eleanor said quietly. More than he knew how to show. He saw himself in you, I think. Saw what he could have been if he'd made different choices. I'll honor it. The gift. The trust. All of it. I know you will, dear. You already have. The years continued to pass. Ethan and Ryan ran the ranch together, making it more prosperous than it had ever been under Mr. Vance's sole control. They diversified cattle, horses, and eventually crops when new irrigation techniques made farming viable in the territory. Colt's horses became legendary. He married a woman from town, had 3 children, and seemed to find a peace that had always eluded him before. The darkness Mr. Vance had mentioned was still there sometimes. Ryan could see it in his eyes on bad days. But Colt had learned to live with it instead of letting it control him. Sarah's school grew. She never married, claiming she was married to her work. And by the time she was 30, she'd educated 200 girls and young women. Some stayed in the territory. Others went east to universities, becoming teachers and doctors and lawyers. Sarah's quiet revolution. And Ryan built his house on the land his father had left him, combining it with Mr. Vance's North 40 to create a small but prosperous spread of his own. He married, eventually, a widow from town with 2 young children who needed a father. He raised them as his own, gave them the childhood he'd never had. Stable, safe, full of love instead of anger. 10 years after arriving at the Vance property, Ryan stood at Mr. Vance's grave during a spring rain, telling the old man about the latest developments. The railroad's bringing in a spur line, right through what used to be the disputed territory. Ethan negotiated a deal where we get a percentage of the freight charges for cattle shipped from our land. Sarah's school is getting a new building, funded by the territorial government, and Colt's horses sold for record prices at auction last month. He's talking about expanding, maybe opening a breeding facility in Denver. He paused, wiping rain from his face. I wish you could see it. See what we've built. See what your children have become. You'd be proud, frustrated sometimes because none of us do things exactly like you would have, but proud. He is proud. Ryan turned. Eleanor stood there with an umbrella, her hair white now, but her eyes still sharp. I like to think so, Ryan said. I know so. He told me those last few days. Said he'd spent his whole life trying to build something that would last, and he finally realized he'd succeeded. Not because of the land or the cattle or any of that, but because of his children, because they were better than him. She smiled. And because of you. The son he never had until it was almost too late. I wasn't his son. No. But you were family, and in the end, that's all that matters. She linked her arm through his. Come. Sarah's here with the children. Let's go back to the house. They walked together through the rain, back toward the house where lights glowed warm in the windows and voices drifted out. Ryan's wife was there with the children, Ethan and his growing family, Colt and his wife. Sarah, still unmarried but surrounded by former students who called her Aunt Sarah and brought their own children to meet her. This was what Ryan had built. Not alone, never alone, but alongside people who'd taken him in when he had nothing and given him the chance to become someone new. As they reached the porch, Ryan looked back one more time at the land stretching out in all directions. Harsh land, unforgiving land, but land that had shaped him, tested him, and ultimately accepted him. He thought about his father's last letter. Be good, Ryan. Be better than your old man. He'd done it. Not perfectly. He still made mistakes, still lost his temper sometimes, still had days where the anger threatened to consume him, but he'd built a life worth living, had created something that would last, had proved that who you were didn't have to be defined by where you came from. Ryan? His wife called from the door. You coming in? Yeah, he said, climbing the steps. I'm coming. He went inside, into the warmth and the noise and the beautiful chaos of family. The door closed behind him, and through the window the lights of the house shone out across the darkening land like a promise, like proof that even in the harshest places, even starting from the worst circumstances, It was possible to build something good, something real, something that mattered. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. The wind picked up, blowing rain across the empty land. But inside the house, there was light and warmth and laughter. There was family, earned and chosen and fought for. There was home. And Ryan Calder, who'd arrived with nothing but a name and a past he couldn't escape, had finally found where he belonged. Not by running from who he'd been, but by choosing every day to be something more, something better. The story of the Vance Ranch would continue long after Ryan was gone. His children and their children would work this land, build on what he and Ethan and Colt and Sarah had created. They'd face their own challenges, make their own mistakes, forge their own paths. But they'd do it knowing that the man who'd helped build all this had started with nothing, had been judged and dismissed and written off as just another outlaw's son destined for the gallows. And they'd know that he'd proven everyone wrong, not through violence or running away or any of the easy paths his father had chosen, but through the hard work of staying, of choosing right over easy day after day after day, of believing that who you became mattered more than who you'd been. That was Ryan Calder's legacy, not land or money or even the partnership in the ranch, but the simple, powerful truth that people could change, that the past didn't have to be destiny, that even the broken could become whole if they found the right people and the courage to try. The rain continued into the night, washing the land clean, preparing it for whatever came next. And inside the warm house, surrounded by the family he'd chosen and who'd chosen him back, Ryan Calder finally allowed himself to believe what he'd spent years trying to accept. He was home, he was loved, he was enough, and that was all he'd ever really needed to be.